Footy was everything to Tim growing up, giving him something to strive for and a place to belong. But there was plenty he never shared with his teammates. Living with OCD compulsions since childhood and diagnosed with depression and anxiety at 19, the chaos in Tim's mind ruled everything from game day to daily life. Enduring multiple knee reconstructions, a gambling problem, and more mistakes than he can count, Tim's finally found a way forward built on honesty and connection. Now a presenter and mentor with Outside the Locker Room, he's using his lived experience to help sporting clubs shape better mental health culture, paving the way of the future brick by brick. This is Tim Cook.
Welcome to Young Blood, the volunteer video podcast dedicated to young men's mental health. I'm your host, Cal McPherson, and this is a platform for young men and their loved ones to share lived experience stories and show that no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. Suicide is the number one killer of young people, and changing that starts with speaking up. So let's do it. This show touches on some tough topics that may provoke strong emotions. If you find anything in this chat distressing, please do whatever you need to do to look after yourself.
Tim, what did footy mean to you growing up?
I think at the time, it didn't mean as much as what my reflection on football has meant. So at the time, it was a great outlet, a great source of connection. But it's like anything in life. Once you stop playing it, you do realise how much you miss it and how much you miss that connection. So for me, playing football at the time, whilst I was in that environment, it was hard work, it was effort to get there and to put that time in, and somewhat rewarding in terms of, you know, the changes in your body and all that kind of stuff that you see, your fitness and your skill development. But it probably wasn't until after I finished football, or definitely stood away from that environment, that I realised the importance of that and the role that the community can play in that role as well.
How much of a part of your life was it from the time you were a kid into being a teenager? And beyond?
Did the Oz kick and everything like that, and then started under nines, played all the way up until under 16s, and then moved over to the senior club. So I was at Bayswater Football Club, and then I played from 19 or under 18s back it was then into the senior team, which was really cool experience, met a lot of cool people, and again, challenged myself, played a few senior games, which was nice. So again, at the time, kind of took it for granted, probably thought football was going to be around forever and I'd be playing it forever. And I certainly noticed, you know, looking back on the reflection side of it as well, my lead up into my games, my anxiety I had before games, the OCD compulsions I had before games. Pretty crazy to think that was just how I was living and existing in that moment. I stood away from the footy club, Bayswater Football Club, a couple of years and went somewhere else, and then ended up back there. But, you know, as soon as I came back, I definitely felt that love again and that connection. And, you know, I haven't played in a few years other than unfortunately filling in for a game this year and unfortunately tearing my ACL. But that's why you never fill in. You either commit or you don't. But, you know, that's the kind of thing that, in my opinion, that we were short on numbers, and I wanted to help out, and I wanted to push my body and test my body. And unfortunately, my body couldn't go with it, which is okay. But yeah, no, I definitely spent a lot of time in that football environment. And, you know, I'll probably get to it in a bit in the story, that when I wasn't playing, I was still involved in some capacity. So when I was back at the club, I was the senior runner, which I know a lot of people probably don't think is that important, but I absolutely loved it. So the runner is the person that delivers the messages from the coaches. So I absolutely loved that role, got me fit. It got me to be a part of that community. We win games, I was singing songs. You know, we lose games and it wasn't my fault. So it was a really win-win situation for me in that environment. But yeah, that was definitely something that I've been around that environment and that club for a long time now. So unfortunately, it was actually my third ACL that I've done. I've done two on the left, and then this was on the right this time. So my good knee's become my bad knee. My bad knee's become my good knee. So at this stage, I'm probably going to go without surgery, just because I'm never going back to that kind of sport, but I just want to be able to go for a run. So running's pretty important to me, and I really enjoy it. I'm not a good runner by any means, but I enjoy the process, again, challenging myself, pushing myself. But, you know, that's really all I want to be able to do in that space too.
Man, running must be a real challenge with two bung knees.
Well, yeah. Well, at the time it was only one, but now it is two. So we'll see how I haven't been able to go for a run yet. It was only about 4 weeks ago. So yeah, it will be challenging. But, you know, I've had other challenges along the way, body-wise. I was actually reflecting on my last 4 games of football. So I played football up until the age of 24, 25 when I did my first knee. And then I tried to come back, and the first game back, I did the same knee again. And then I basically said football's not for me. But then I, again, when you're in that environment, the team needs numbers. A couple of years ago, I pulled them back on just for one game, which was so much fun. Absolutely loved it. We got the win, which was awesome. But I did break my finger in that game. And
Okay,
then
you're a bit of a liability, mate. Sorry.
And then I played about 4 weeks ago. Again, currently coaching the reserves team at Bayswater. So they were short on numbers, and I thought I'd put my hand up. And again, that anxiety that I spoke about around having that around your before games, it certainly came back, and that OCD, the compulsions was certainly there. But it was always in the back of my mind that something bad would happen. But I have lived, again, this is on the reflection and even sort of going through it a bit, I suppose, but I've lived a lot of my life in fear through my OCD. So a lot of my life has been, don't do this because of that, don't do this in case that happens. So I kind of wanted to own that, rightfully or wrongfully. My wife's a physio and she was not really impressed, but
You keep her busy then?
Keeping her busy, absolutely. Number one client. But I did have a support, and that was something, again, a new challenge. This is my first year coaching, so the challenge of actually coaching itself has been awesome. But again, just to gain a different perspective on the coaching by being out there on the ground and trying to practice what I preach, and I tell people to go give me effort, and it was like awesome. So now I get an opportunity to show them what I mean by that. Unfortunately, it only lasted about a quarter and a half, but it was still pretty cool to have that experience and to pull the jumper on one last time as well for a club that has definitely meant a lot to me in terms of support, in terms of connection, in terms of community. It was pretty cool to put that jumper on one last time and to play a game, which regardless of the knee. I actually had a guy message me the day after, how's your knee going? I said, shit, it's horrible. And he goes, but I bet you can't wipe that smile off your face. And I was like, nah, you're right. Like, I was so happy that I got to be a part of it, got to be on the end of receiving, some feedback and stuff like that. So that was really cool. That was a really cool experience, regardless of the result and how my body didn't get through. But I was really still happy and was able to find a lot of positives in that situation.
We call that the glass half full mentality, Tim.
Very, very much so. And it was actually funny. I caught up with a guy this morning and we were talking about the perspective shift and things like that. And I noticed I had been putting a fair bit of work into myself and trying to, become a better person, a better leader, but also grow a lot and develop. And I could definitely tell that with how I responded to this challenge. So again, that's just how I'm looking at it. It's just another one of life's challenges. These things happen and it's just sort of how we get through it, I suppose. And in the past, when I have done it, I've definitely turned to my negative coping mechanisms. So in the past, when I did it sort of 10 years ago, it was drinking, it was gambling, it was going down sort of that path. Whereas this time I was definitely shattered, but I think I was more shattered the fact that my body had actually let me down because I'd put a lot of work into it. But it was then okay. So the Saturday night and probably first thing Sunday morning were really, really tough for me. But then something just switched and it was just like, okay, cool, another challenge. Now when people tell you can run in 12 weeks and you're able to run in 10, you've shown them, you've proven to yourself. So that's kind of been in the back of my mind with my rehab that I've been doing with my leg exercises and strengthening and all that. It's kind of trying to push myself to that limit where I can achieve something that people didn't agree with or don't think was possible. Just like coming back to play, even though they were right eventually, but just that mindset shift of it's okay. It's just another challenge. These things happen, and I never like to compare myself to others in the world because I think comparison's the thief of joy, as we all know. But, there are a lot of people out there that have a lot more challenging times. And if someone can see what I'm doing and how I'm approaching this challenge, maybe they take a little bit from it and go, okay, cool. I can also do that. I can also come back that way with that mindset. So that's kind of been, I suppose, that role of leadership that I'm really trying to instill at the football club, but also with my friends and stuff around me that see it.
Have you always motivated yourself in that way with the narrative of proving people wrong?
Nah, not at all. I've for a long time been the victim mentality for a long time. And this was probably from my mid-20s to say 30. It was very much, other people, it's other people's fault. I'm the victim. Why isn't this stuff happening for me? Why does everyone else seem to be advancing in life? Why does everyone else seem to be buying houses and stuff like that? But again, reflection is such a great tool, but looking back on those things, it was the reason I wasn't buying houses at that age was because I was going to the pub every weekend, or I was going out every weekend, and I was gambling a lot. And, that kind of stuff there where you only have yourself to blame in those circumstances because you've just got to you just got to play the hand you dealt. But back then I definitely didn't know that. So I'd like to think at this stage I have grown and I've learned and I am a lot more wise in that area as well.
How does your OCD factor into some of those things that you just mentioned?
Yeah, the OCD is an interesting one, and we'll probably get to the mental health side of the challenges I've gone through. So 19 years old, I diagnosed with depression and anxiety, but I actually had OCD. I still remember my first compulsion at the age of 8. So when I was 8 years old, I first had that urge to do something, and it was around watching someone on TV who had gone through an accident. So I thought, I never want that to happen to me. And I wouldn't say that I grew up in a house that was very superstitious, but my parents always did the touch wood. So like, oh, I hope that doesn't happen, touch wood kind of thing. And I
Yeah,
saw
mine
that,
did that.
and yeah, and so like a little bit of a protective piece. So when I saw that happen on the news, I did the shit, I hope it doesn't happen to me, touch wood. Obviously, I probably didn't swear then as an 8-year-old, but I still remember that compulsion. I remember the table. I remember all that part of it. And that's molded, that went from there and snowballed and molded into a lot of different compulsions. And obviously with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, the easiest way I can describe it is it's an itch on your brain that has to be scratched, and there's no two ways about it. You have to scratch it. And the way I was able to scratch it was by doing my compulsions. And so they ranged from filling up drink bottles a certain amount of times, light switches on and off a certain amount of times, checking appliances being off, washing my hands was a big one, which is a pretty common one with people that have gone through OCD or going through it. So these were all the things that were happening through my mind. And you're dealing with that. And a lot of people, like I just ran through my track record there with my last 4 games of football. Now, before games of football, I was struggling to sleep the night before because I was going through all these compulsions and I was doing them in my room, setting alarms a certain amount of times, doing the touchwood thing again, all these little bits and pieces that I was doing because I was fearful of getting hurt from football. It never altered the way I played. I still feel like I never shirked a contest or anything like that. I'm pretty proud to say that I never did that. But at the time, it was almost like, oh, cool, you've got that backing to do that because you've done these OCD compulsions. And when the injuries started happening, I can safely say I've never had a soft tissue injury, but again, I don't think I've ever been quick enough to have a soft tissue injury, never gotten too much of a sprint. But what I found was a lot of people, when they go through a challenge or an injury like that, would probably think, well, the OCD doesn't, the compulsions don't work. You've done all these rituals and these compulsions to get through a game of football, but you've tore your ACL. Now, my mind didn't work that way. My mind went, you haven't done enough. So all of a sudden, rather than almost using it as a way to get out of it, my mind, I just spiraled and I went further and further into that space. So it's kind of an interesting mindset through my OCD. But one thing that really cool one thing that was really cool that happened along those lines or around that area as well was I had my appendix out. When was it? It was probably 18 months ago, I reckon. And so as a result, I was laid up for a couple of weeks, no let a run or anything, and we had a footy practice game on, which was up in Deniliquin, so I wasn't able to go to that. So instead, I went and did a breathwork class. So it's the first time I've ever gone and done one. It was called a breakthrough breathwork with the Energy Studio. And basically what happened in that was I had this absolute experience. And again, I don't know if anyone here or any of the listeners have done breathwork before, but it was a very, very cool experience for me. And I went in completely ignorant. I had no idea what was going on. And I didn't really want to know. I wanted to just be caught up in the moment. And what happened was I felt this almost like yoga block sort of in my stomach, and I felt it just rise when I'm in this sort of meditative state. And as soon as it hit my head, I just bawled out crying. And after I sort of came back from all of that experience, I didn't have any OCD compulsions. So leading into it, I was checking my shoes and I was filling up drink bottle and then on my yoga mat, drinking a certain amount of time. So really, really high strung. But as soon as I had that experience, it all just felt like it just left me. And so one thing that really worked for that was obviously that breathwork experience. So I continued to do that. And now I wouldn't say my OCD is completely gone. Like, for example, I still get it a tiny bit before I present with work because it's a high stress environment and I'm worried I'm going to mess up. And even before this podcast, I was worried I'm going to mess up. So one or two might sneak in, but I would say rather than 100%, it's probably at about a 3 or 4% now of impact, and the disruption to my life is almost non-existent anymore. I don't have anything that makes me late anywhere because I'm still inside turning light switches on and off, and that disruption piece is really gone, and I owe that to the breath work and going in and being vulnerable in that space as well, which is really cool. So I think that the message I give during our sessions is that, I'm a big journaler. I like to have ice baths, I meditate, I do breath work, I exercise, all that kind of stuff, because that works for me. And so it's not going to work for everyone, and that's completely okay. Parts of that might, but they all work for me, so I do them. So if there's something that does work for you, then go ahead and do it, because I think that's a really, really powerful message to give, that if something is working for you, why not stick at it? Why not keep doing it? Who cares what other people think? If someone goes, geez, breathwork's weird, okay, what does that mean to me? I'm still going to do it because it makes me feel good and it helps with my trauma, it helps with my healing, it helps with my development as a person as well. So that's kind of the I suppose, how the OCD plays into sports and fear and that for me as well. I hope that answered your question. As I said before, I do tend to talk in roundabout ways with my stories. So
It does make a lot of sense. And I think that's an important point, that everyone is different. And you certainly hear about that on this podcast, that there's plenty of things that'll work for someone that someone else will disagree with or have a negative experience. And a lot of men in particular might have a negative experience with traditional therapy and then go and see a psychologist and feel like that didn't work for them. And in a lot of cases, that might not be because psychology doesn't work for them. It might just be that the person that they went to sit down with the first time wasn't right for them. And that's a pretty common experience.
exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. And I think you have to connect with someone because the connection piece is so big. So when I was going through my challenges, I saw a psychologist, but I didn't really get anything out of it. I think there's probably two reasons. One, I didn't connect with her. But two, I treated it just like like homework. Like I just wanted to tick it off. And so each session I did, and this was when I had my mental health plan. I had 8 to 10 sessions or whatever it was, but it was just like, get it done, get it done, get it done. And and I was like, I didn't really get anything from that. But then when I went back and saw another one, I went to a different one and I connected with this guy and I was able to feel vulnerable and open up and start to discuss things as to why I have that imposter syndrome, why I have that feeling that I'm not good enough, where has that stemmed from? And through that connection piece was huge. I mean, like a psychologist, I think there's good and bad in people and good and bad in any profession, but that connection piece has to be there. I think that is something that you must connect with as well.
But going to see a psychologist didn't give you that kind of euphoric experience and that level of release that you described from the breath work?
No, not at all. Not at all. Definitely not the same. But it's interesting because I'm the person I am today and I've got heaps of improvement and growth still to go, but I feel like the way that I've come so far is definitely from the point of a combination of everything. It's not just been one quick fix. How good's this? I put a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of gym sessions and a lot of running sessions and a lot of time that people don't see, where you're by yourself and you're journaling, or you're by yourself and you're doing a 10-minute meditation or breath work before something. And people don't see that, but they just somehow they hear what you've done in some regard and they're like, oh, cool, so you just sent a psych. That must work. But that's not it. So the message to everyone is try different things and try them at the same time, because there's not going to be a one quick answer for anything. It's going to be a multiple of things that do work for you. But yeah, that's kind of my experience on that matter anyway.
But with that history and that combination of things going for you, when you had that breathwork session, that really was like a light switch, light bulb moment.
That was probably the biggest improvement I've noticed out of a once-off event, for sure. And again, going in not really knowing too much about it, my wife messaged me after going, how'd you go? And I was just like, caught it and I was like, what the fuck was that? Like, what just happened? I was in tears the entire time, and again was in a pretty cool space. There was probably 8 to 10 men in the room that, we're all vulnerable, we're all open and honest, and I was the youngest in the room by about 10 years as well, which was cool. So yeah, I don't know, it was just that ability to, or want to be open about this, because you can go to that and not have the same experience because you're not allowing yourself to get in that moment and be vulnerable. But it's definitely on the person, I feel.
Yeah, I went to a really intense breathwork session like that years ago, which again, I didn't have any background in. And it was one of those ones that went for hours, which subsequently I went to ones that were like half an hour and nowhere near as hectic. So I realized like, wow, that was really full on. And there are a lot of guys that are having similar experiences, like crying and getting the dinosaur hands from the hyperventilating and stuff. Yeah. And so I think it's, I can understand why it would put some people off, or people would think like, oh, you're whipping yourself up into that state and that's what's giving that illusion of having that kind of a release, because you're breathing really fast and you like physiologically you're kind of whipping yourself up to a level where it then makes you more emotional. But then obviously there's so many people like yourself and people that I've seen that find it hugely beneficial, and it creates an environment for them to have that kind of a release. So yeah, how do you square those two things?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to what works for you. So there's going to be people that would absolutely hate that. Like my brother, for example, I don't think he would have the patience to go through it. He might, but he's better off having a tough day going and punching a punching bag. Go and do some boxing. That's his release. His release is gym work. His release is also spending time with his family. So everyone has their own releases and their own coping strategies that work for them. And that's completely okay if they're different. When we run our sessions with outside the locker room, we get people to identify what they do for fun and what makes them happy. So what is the thing that makes you smile? And then we're like, well, how long has it been since you've done it? And for a lot of people, they might say it's walking the dog, going for a run, going to the gym, reading a book, doing the garden, whatever it is. Everyone's going to be different, but also there'll be a lot of commonality in that room as well. So the first part is we try and encourage them to go do more of that. But the second part is we try and get them to open up and talk to the people around them about what it is, because you might find that you actually have something in common with someone that you never knew. So if it is breath work and all of a sudden there's someone else in the room that has written down breath work, well, that's cool. Now you've just connected on something that you both like doing and you both can do. You can either go do it together or you can share your experiences. So it becomes a lot less isolating in that factor. And it's okay to have best mates and family members and brothers and sisters that don't share those opinions with you. It's completely fine. I think we need to be, when we are in those spaces with our loved ones and the people that we do care about, it's cool to be challenged on things and have those conversations where someone doesn't agree and you kind of have to explain why it works for you. But it's pretty cool when you find like-minded people as well that want to jump on board and almost learn from you, but learn with you as well. So I think that it's kind of it's open to anyone's interpretation on that.
The thing that struck me about the breathwork thing is really that it was the environment of vulnerability that was created that really supplied the benefit, because there was a bunch of guys there who'd never met before, but because everyone was immediately bonded by doing this activity together, which they wouldn't normally do, and so you're all on the same level and you all become emotional. Then after, because everyone was sort of there for the same reason, people were much more open to then opening up and talking about their own lives and what they struggle with. And that's really what the value was people being able to unburden themselves with, the fact that they don't have the relationship they want with their parents or with their partner, or they feel like they're failing as a man doing X, Y, Z, and that they didn't get another opportunity in their normal life to have that kind of experience. And so, yeah, there was the physical part with the breath work, which kind of created the scenario, but it was really actually being able to talk about it with another group of guys that weren't judging them. That seemed to be the magic of it. And however you can get to that is probably where most of the benefit is. You can say there's benefit to breathworks in the actual activity itself, but any way that you can get to that kind of genuine connection that we don't feel we have the right to express in our day-to-day lives is where there's a lot of benefit to be found, where that release comes from.
Yeah, for sure. And you're spot on as well. That's the community that we always talk about. And there's communities everywhere, whether they be your workmates, whether they be your school friends that you still talk to, whether that be a sporting club you're a part of. Right then in that moment where there was 8 to 10 men in the room, various ages between 30 and 60, that became a community because we're all sharing an experience and we're all, again, I'll say the word vulnerable again, but that's exactly what we were being. We were giving into the environment we were in, and we were able to open up after with a judgment-free zone that no one cared if you got upset. No one cared if you had the dinosaur hands and, you were howling because you were going through, a moment. No one cared about that. It was cool that we're all on our own journey in that moment, but we're also able to come back at the end, as you said, and actually debrief. And I think that's what caused that connection after as well, because it was just everyone being open and honest. And that was a fantastic part. It was just that connection piece at the end, which really helped.
I think that's really refreshing for people, and we really need it, because a lot of our interactions are that surface level automated response where we're not actually telling the truth because we don't have time, or it wouldn't be appropriate in the context. You're at work and you see someone you don't really know, but you know their name and they say, "Hey, how are you going?" You're probably not going to say the actual truth of how you're going if,
for sure.
in that scenario.
It's kind of funny. I actually, again, I'm an open book on anything. If you want to talk money, I'll talk money. If you want to talk life, I'll talk life. So I'm very much open. And again, I've got no issues with that. And an example of that is my wife and I are currently going through IVF. Now, it's been hard for sure. It's been challenging. We've done a couple of cycles, but I feel like there's power in talking about lived experience because it helps other people open up and, again, create that connection. the amount of people that I've spoken to about IVF and they've turned around and gone, oh, my brother's gone through it or my sister or I'm going through it myself. And again, you just find that common ground or connection in that piece, and that's powerful. So then you now know you've got someone else that you can lean on if you need a chat, someone who may actually understand what you're going through rather than someone who is wholeheartedly trying to support you, but actually doesn't know the process, doesn't know the waiting periods, doesn't know the roller coaster up and downs when you get a fault, you get a positive pregnancy test, but a negative blood test, and they don't understand that. They want to, and they want to support you. But sometimes you do just need someone who's currently going through it. And so last night at footy training, one of the guys goes, how you going? I said, oh yeah, I'm okay, mate. He goes, how's everything going with your wife? And I said, nah, it's all great between us, but unfortunately we just had a negative IVF experience and process and stuff like that. So I'm very open with that, but I can certainly understand why people aren't, because we can be very afraid of being judged. Certainly as men, we can be very afraid of being weak. But at the end of the day, I'm a big believer that, you own your circumstances. As I said, you play the hand you dealt. Yeah, if by owning it, it encourages and inspires others to do the same, which means we're all then owning our shit.
It does take that common experience, and sometimes it's people are well intentioned in wanting to be there for you, but it can cut through a lot more if someone's actually done that themselves or experienced a miscarriage or whatever it is. And I haven't gone through that myself yet, but I imagine that it would be easy to see all your mates who are having successful pregnancy go through that, and it seemingly seems easy, and it would be easy to imagine, everyone else is able to do this except for us. And that's actually far from the truth, as so many people struggle with it. And that's the case with so many things.
Yeah. And definitely early on in that piece, and this is where I think the growth factors come for myself with, my wife and I have been trying for about 2.5 years now, pregnancy wise. And at the start, when we were trying, all of our friends were getting pregnant. Yeah, that feeling of jealousy at the same time, you're so happy for them, but you can't help but feel, why isn't it happening to us? We're fit, we're healthy, we're good people. Why can't we have a child when everyone else gets to? And I'm not saying my mates aren't good people or anything like that, but you do compare, and that's that comparison is the thief of joy again. So I think one thing that, and it's not just with the pregnancy or the IVF stuff, it's with life, that part that everyone wants to care and everyone wants to be a really good friend to people. Well, if someone's lost a parent, they're going to connect a lot more with someone else who's lost a parent rather than a best friend who just wants to consistently check in. And that's just the nature of it. We're bonded, we're connected through those challenges or experiences that we've gone through, and from a lot lower level, someone who has an ACL reconstruction and then someone who has already gone through it, you can lean to them as a bit of a mentor, or how did you go, how'd you find it, rather than someone who has two perfectly good knees. And that's fine as well. You're still going to check in on someone, still going to make sure they're okay. But we do get bonded sometimes by the experiences we go through. But again, the message I think on the growth factor is it's your journey, not anyone else's. So if someone is getting pregnant, that's their journey. If you're not, that's okay, because that's your journey. So we really need just to own our own spaces that we're going into and not take that away from anyone else, or not try and bring anyone else down if someone else is going quite well, if that makes sense. And that probably refers back to the whole tall poppy syndrome that we always talk about as well.
Yeah, and that's not to say that you have to have the exact same shared experience as your mate in order to be able to support them. You absolutely don't. It's going to help anyone if you check in whatever happens to be going on in life. But yeah, if you have been through a similar thing, especially something as visceral as issues with pregnancy, then that's going to make an impact, being able to relate to someone on that level.
Yeah, and subconsciously, that's probably one of the reasons, as I said, I like to talk about it because I like to inspire others. But I think one of the reasons I also like to talk about it is because I'm not 100% every day in terms of my mood and how I'm feeling. And if I'm showing up to, say, the footy club to coach and something's happened, we've had another unsuccessful attempt with pregnancy and IVF, I'm clearly going to be flat. But I want them to know that that's the reason. It's not anything they've done. And so that's the idea, that we need to be able to talk about everything in our life, so then our friends can actually support us. And as you said, you don't have to have gone through it yourself to support someone. Absolutely not. But if you don't know what's going on, you can't support someone because you have no idea. You just think, oh yeah, there's Tim, he's going well again, cool, he's smiling, he's happy. Oh, he looks a bit frowny today, maybe he's had a bad day at work. You don't know. So that's where we need to start those conversations a bit more and actually be a bit more open and honest, rather than that message that says, hey mate, how are you? And the response saying, good mate, you, good, you. Like, going a bit deeper. Actually, you know what? I'm struggling today. Or if you're going well, tell someone. I'm going really well, to be honest. I'm up here at the moment. You know, life's good. I'm killing it at work. You know, it's got a new car, you know, all these kind of things. But the unfortunate thing as Australians is we cut people down when they do that. That's the tall poppy syndrome we always talk about. We want to, if someone's up here and I'm here, rather than me bring them down to me, I want to know what they're doing so I can go up to there. So again, if they're saying they're doing exercise in the morning, they haven't drank in 6 months, they're, you know, they're ice baths in the morning, breath work. If I'm seeing all of that, rather than be like, oh, you're not drinking, what an idiot, why aren't you, you're boring? Why wouldn't I take a leaf of that book and go, okay, maybe I'll try a month, see what happens in a month. If I don't drink for a month, maybe I'll go up here. Maybe if I do morning ice baths, I go up here and just use what works for someone else just to see if it works for you. And it might not. That's okay. But at least you're trying and you're trying to improve there as well. But you're also not bringing someone down, which I think is the most important part.
Because the status quo for Australians is we don't want to big note ourselves and talk about when things are going well, but we also don't want to talk about when things aren't going well. Right.
We just want to stay here. We just want
to kind of say nothing and have that attitude of, well, I should be able to handle whatever is happening in my life. And if things are going well, I don't want to tell people about it because they'll just think I'm a dickhead. Yeah. So instead,
I'm arrogant, I'm a wanker, all that kind of stuff.
So people will be like, okay, good for you, your hero, must be nice kind of thing. And it's like, all right, well.
Yeah. It's such an interesting thing, isn't it?
We can get caught in the middle where all you're ever doing is coasting through on the surface level and never actually telling anyone how you're doing, whether be it good or bad, and just keeping everything to yourself, which isn't really getting anywhere for anyone. And that's, I think, why plenty of people who lack the kind of trust in their connections to be able to talk about when things are going really well or talk about when things aren't going well, struggle to have connection because you can't connect with someone if they're just going, yeah, good, weather's cold, you know, and sometimes there are interactions that we need to have. We can't be going deep with everyone, but if you don't go deep with anyone, then you're not going to.
Yeah, exactly right. And a way that we try to get around this at our footy club, because again, community sporting clubs are such a powerful place. They give us so much connection, so much purpose, so much belonging. And one way that we try to get around that factor of, you know, no one celebrating anyone's achievements is one of the pre-seasons 2 years ago, we brought down a bell, like a physical bell to ring. And the idea was that anytime you hit a PB, anytime you set out to achieve something football-wise, you would ring that bell. So whether it was a running PB, whether it was a lifting PB, whether you lost weight, whether you put on weight, whatever you were trying to achieve, you'd tell the group and you'd ring the bell and everyone got around you. But what we found started happening was people wanted to start doing their personal life. So I got a new car, I got engaged, I got a new job, I got the promotion, all these things, and people couldn't wait to go and ring the bell, which was awesome. So we started to find a lot more people being open and connected around that space rather than being like, how's work going? Yeah, good. Okay, how's work going? Awesome. I got a promotion. Oh, make sure you ring the bell. You know, one of the coaches put his hands up and came in. He goes, he's been off with mental health leave. And he goes, I got my first job in 4 years. Should I ring the bell? And I was like, absolutely, mate. That's an achievement. Like, let's celebrate that. And so everyone got around him. And that was a really cool thing to do because I think that we don't often get a space, as we said before, to celebrate something we've worked hard on. And football is a really easy example of this because throughout your fitness work, you should improve. So if you're running X amount per day, you should either get quicker or faster or stronger, whatever you're trying to achieve. If you commit to it, you should see results. You know, obviously you put your balanced diet in, no injuries, all that kind of stuff. But what happens when you achieve that thing? What are you just going to celebrate it or just be like, cool, I ran my PB, what do I do now? If you celebrate it, it gives you more motivation to keep pushing forward. But also what it does is it inspires others. So all of a sudden I see someone run a 2K PB. I'm going, how good's that? If they've just busted their ass for 3 months to get a 2K PB, I can surely go to the gym tonight. I can surely go for a run myself. Like that's kind of the mindset that we were trying to instill there with the pushing each other and the belief in each other and that kind of stuff too, which I thought that's what I saw come from it too.
Yeah, and it's a nice way of showing people that life's little wins are worth celebrating. It's really easy to go through life not celebrating any of your wins, looking for threats and looking for problems because that's our survival instinct. So when things are going well, a lot of the time, rather than celebrating, we'll go, oh yeah, but there's still this and this, or it's not so good. You know, once I sort out this and that, then maybe I can relax and celebrate a win. And of course, life being the way it is, there's never a point where you've got all your bases covered and everything's ticked off and then now you can finally celebrate. But we can get in the habit of not celebrating at all or patting ourselves on the back, one, because of the poppy syndrome culture, but then also because there's so many pressures on us in modern life that like one win can feel like it doesn't really matter much because there's this mountain of other shit that we're trying to figure out.
Yeah, there's always something else. And to that point as well, I think we should consistently celebrate what we go through, but we should consistently try and get more, achieve more. The idea of actually achieving a goal, it frightens me because as soon as you achieve it, that level of complacency comes in and you think, what's next? And I felt a little bit of that this year. I was running a fair bit and I ended up hitting a 1K PB and a 2K PB over the off season for footy. But I noticed as soon as I hit them, I was like, well, I don't think I'm actually going to get quicker, to be honest. I don't think it's possible. So, and not to say that I ran a world record, I just literally don't think I can run any quicker than that. So my mindset straight away went to the what's next? What's my next challenge? And so I tried to kind of keep pushing myself in that way, but it's easy to get caught up as soon as you achieve something that you just stop. Whereas my mind should have been, well, you've just done this with work. You've achieved this PB. Why can't you go more? Why can't you go quicker? Why can't you shave an extra second off that time? You should be able to because you've seen the results and the effort you've put in. But so often, if we do hit a target, we stop, we get stagnant. We go, well, that's it. I've done it. Have you? But what's next? Why not consistently try and aim for something else and achieve that goal? And that's the thing with my knee right now. My current challenge for my physical health is to get my knee back as good as it can so I can run again. And I know that's a pretty broad challenge, but I love running and that's something I want to get back to. So that's in the back of my mind. Every gym session, every leg strengthening thing I do, it's, geez, I can't wait. Maybe it's 9 weeks away, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 6, who knows? But I'm going to push myself as hard as I can to try and get there because that's something I need. But as soon as I get there, I guarantee you, I'm going to be like, okay, cool. Well, now I'm going to try and get back to that PB time because again, having 12 weeks off running, that's when you're not running those PB times, but I can certainly get back to it. So that's kind of my mindset. It's work really hard to achieve something, but also have that next thing in mind to be like, once you're there, what's next? Once you're there, what's next? Once you're there, what's next? You need to keep going, keep pushing. And that's the same with work. That's the same with life. You really want to save up and buy a house. Fantastic. You've done it. But now what? If you don't have that mindset that you're going to renovate, but why not? Why not do something else? Why not try and go again for another house? Like that. Like keep working, keep building, keep pushing yourself to your limits to test yourself because why not? We're only here on this earth for a little, a limited amount of time in the schemes of things, a short amount of time. So try and be the best you can be and help people along the way and do whatever else.
Well, not just why not, but it's also fundamentally linked to contentment and satisfaction and happiness is setting goals and achieving them. That's how we have those feelings, those endorphins that we're chasing and feel like we're happy or we're living a good life is if we're setting goals and then we're able to tick them off. And so it's less so about thinking that the next goal you reach is going to solve all your problems. And it's more about being the kind of person that sets goals, sticks to their word, does the required work and then gets there and can enjoy and learn along the journey. That's really the important thing because that gives us life satisfaction. Because if you stop having goals, either because you think, oh, well, I had a goal and I achieved it, and so that's it, or there's no point having goals because life's pointless, then you just end up kind of drifting and nihilistic. And the best part about having a goal, are you saying like whether it's running or it's lifting or it's something to do with buying a house or whatever it is that it's in the distance and you're going to have to set your life up a certain way and you're going to have to put in a certain amount of effort to get there. And it's actually that feeling of organizing yourself and putting in effort and trying that actually feels worthwhile. That makes you value yourself. And without that, if you're just directionless, then it's pretty hard to not get depressed because if you don't really have a reason to get up in the morning, whatever that might be, then that's a slippery slope.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then, you lack purpose. And when you lack purpose, as you said, you fall straight into that depressive state. You fall into that part where why even get up in the morning? What's my point of getting up in the morning? What am I actually trying to achieve? And so if you can't identify that, the challenging thing I think with all of that stuff is it's probably education around it. So it's not so much like, I think it's more so a lot of people maybe want to start doing something like that, but they don't know how. Whereas I feel like there is so many good podcasts and books and everything like that out there that you can go and immerse yourself in and learn little things to try and, upskill, increase your capacity during the day and all that kind of stuff, which will then give you probably more flexibility and freedom to set those goals, to set that purpose. But again, I think that we're probably lucky in some parts that there is so much content out there for us to consume. As bad as sometimes social media and stuff might be, but there is a lot of content out there for us that we can consume and then hopefully put our life again into a better trajectory from where it is.
And you've got this sort of mindset now, Tim, which sounds very healthy and is a great thing to be able to help educate others on. But that's not something that you just have overnight. And with your background, I'm sure it took quite some time to develop. So just talk about your experience with depression and anxiety over the years and going from being someone who is a victim and blaming everyone else to someone who takes personal accountability and sees things a different way.
Yeah, for sure. So currently 34, but at the age of 19, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. So back then, the education wasn't what it is today. So going through school, going through sport, there was never anything there. No one spoke about it. Your mates always asked how you were going and stuff, but it was never, I've noticed these signs in you. So for me, that was a pretty isolating and lonely place. And again, that victim mindset being like, why is this happening to me? This is very unfair, starting to pour a lot of my life into gambling, into drinking. And the drinking for me wasn't an every night thing. I was very much a binge drinker, but when I drank, I went hard. So, and look, I still drink. I still enjoy it. But it was very hard. Like it was a Friday into Saturday, Saturday to Sunday, like, a few times a weekend that you're on it and you're going hard as well. And so the hangovers on Monday were pretty rough. Not to mention you're physically sick, but mentally you're struggling as well. And that for me was, there was a couple of points there that probably called breaking points, certainly around the gambling as well, where, you're spending money you don't have, you're getting into a bit of debt, all that kind of stuff. I think that the turning point with the gambling for me really happened probably around COVID, to be honest. My wife, who's physio, she basically got told that she wasn't going to be able to, she wasn't able to work at some point. And the gambling stuff for me probably ebbed and flowed. There was times I'd be off it, then I'd be back gambling, off, back gambling. So, but sort of since that time, I really knew I had to sort of step up. And that was something that, you can't just switch it off. You need help. So I had to go out and reach out for support through that time, which again was challenging given it was COVID, but I was able to reach out for support, which was fantastic. So, the Gamblers Help, the 100-day challenge, I was doing all of those things with the community. The 100-day challenge is fantastic with like-minded people that, there's a forum for you to say, hey, I'm day 5, I've never made it this far, and people get right around you and lift you up. And that's the fantastic type of thing that you want to see, certainly when you're going through an addiction or a challenge like that. As I said, the drinking stuff was pretty easy to cut back on because, my reasons, that was more around my reasons for drinking, and that was to try and numb a fair bit, mask what I was going through. But once I started to put time into the fact that this is the reason I was drinking was because I was feeling really poor over here, that address that, then that sort of took care of itself, which was good. I was an accountant in a previous life, but I've flipped over to working outside the locker room and been there for almost 3 years. And in that role there, seeing a lot more of these challenges has really helped. Been very eye-opening. Going out to sporting clubs, schools and workplaces and delivering this education has helped. But the biggest thing for me is that want to be better, that self-growth and development part has really helped me. And that comes in many forms. So that's what I call, I wouldn't say I'm so disciplined, but I do try and do things by routine, whether that's the OCD creeping back in, who knows? But, I make sure I try and go to the gym. I make sure I try and do the ice bars. I make sure I try and do some breath work, some meditation, some journaling, whatever it is. That's really helped. The other part of that as well is the leadership part with the footy that I'm currently coaching the reserves at Bayswater. That I know a lot of people might think, it's only a reserves coach or whatever, but I've really taken that on board and taken that role seriously and understanding that we're trying to develop footballers, but at the end of the day, it's a community club. So realistically, we're actually trying to develop people. So how can I expect something of someone if I'm not going to do it myself? And so that's why through pre-season, I was pushing myself quite hard because I wanted to be the best role model I could be when the guys were saying it's too hard to go to training or I can't be bothered going for a run, and they jump onto the Facebook group and there I've already posted a gym session or I've posted a run, trying to inspire through that way. So that's really helped. And through challenges like my ACL, well, yeah, I can be vulnerable and I can tell people I've had a tough time, which I definitely did over that first little period. But I've also found ways to cope through that and new challenges to focus on. And so just trying to inspire through lived experience, I think, has really helped me in this last little bit and understand that we are all role models, whether we know it or not. I like to tell a story. I call it the accidental role model. So my role at the footy club, as I mentioned, is the reserves coach. And one thing I started doing at the footy club was anytime someone got an injury, I'd make them some food, and I started making them a bunch of cookies. So anytime someone was injured, they'd get cookies from me. So I called it the cookie currency, or I call it the cookie currency because it's still happening because we've had heaps of injuries. So it's been non-stop baking. But the reason I do that is because I really enjoy cooking, or baking in that part as well. But I do enjoy time in the kitchen. And it's something I have capacity to do. And that for me is a way that I can show love. So the fact that I can message someone to check in how they're going, fantastic. But the fact that I can also deliver them some cookies on a Saturday when they're having a pretty tough time, that's something I take a bit of pride in.
Do you make a good cookie, mate?
Well, I haven't had any complaints and no sicknesses so far, so that's always a good sign.
Get anyone faking injuries?
Yeah, we've had a couple of them, so that's all right. But it is quite interesting. This is the part I talk about being an accidental role model. Now, I do that because that's something I like doing and something I have capacity to do. Now, when I tore my ACL, I was really flat, obviously, at the start of it. And I went to training, and one of the guys, an under-19 kid, came up to me and he goes, "How you going, mate? How's your knee?" And I said, "Oh, it's cooked, it's done, whatever. I'm waiting on results, but I'm pretty sure it's ACL. I'm a little bit flat about it, but, it's just another one of life's challenges." Now, he then pulled out some cookies and gave them to me. Now, that's an under-19 kid who has seen the actions of someone else in the club, whether he considers me a leader or not. He's just seen the actions of someone else at the club who is supporting people in a way that he likes to do it. Now, he's picked up on that. And so I was never doing this, making cookies for people to get other people to do it. It was something I wanted to implement myself and show that I care through that way. But he's picked up on that as a cool way to support someone. Now, that was something I was very proud of because without realizing it, you've actually inspired someone and potentially, helped them grow as a leader and a person as well. So I thought that was a really cool experience. And I do like to share that story only because whether you like it or not, you're leading and people look at your actions and they absorb that and they see that and it can inspire people. So if you're turning around talking shit about people, people think that that's the new norm. But if you're turning around and supporting people, people think that's the new norm and that's how they like to support people as well. So for me, that was a really cool experience, but I do like to share that story on occasion as well.
The more cookies, the better, man. I suppose not for the weight loss goals, but definitely good for the
not for the weight loss.
Good for the morale.
Yeah, exactly right.
When you were struggling with gambling and drinking, what was missing from your life that was causing you to launch into that more?
It's kind of funny. I never really knew. I thought it was just as a byproduct of the depression, the anxiety, the OCD. I was probably just trying to mask something, whatever. But it actually took me back to the footy club. I told one of my mates who I used to play with that I was going to apply for the coaching role of the reserves. And he actually said, he then was reminded of a time he spoke to another former guy, one of our actual coaches that used to play at the footy club, and he was there on a day that I was there on the balcony and was well inebriated, was pissed on the balcony and carrying on. And this is after I'd just done my second ACL. So I was carrying on a bit, but I kind of felt like, well, I had every right to. Why can't I enjoy some beers? I've gone through a challenge at the moment. Why not get pissed as you can and all that kind of stuff? And I was carrying on and I was abusing players, but I thought I was being funny, all that kind of stuff. And the coach said to my mate, he goes, at the moment, he's lacking purpose. He doesn't have anything. He's going through a challenge. He's lacking purpose. And my mate actually never told me this until I told him I was going for coaching and stuff because I was like, I feel like this is my purpose. And he actually was just reminded of that conversation he had. So at the time, I didn't know what it was. But when people outside of your circle who you see very rarely can clearly identify, and I think sometimes they might be onto something. So in my mind, it was purpose. I didn't have any goals. I didn't have any drive for anything. Again, I was probably stuck in a bit of a rut with work. I was feeling like the world owed me something. And I think that was something that I was definitely needing. I needed something to sink my teeth into because I didn't have it then. That was cool that someone else could identify it. It would have been great to know at the time, but I probably would have been like, what the fuck does he know? He hasn't done his knee. I'm the one going through it. So yeah, whilst nowadays that hindsight mindset is fantastic, but I think it was purpose.
Was it something that you could just switch off? I mean, those are very hard things to stop doing for a
The
lot of people,
addictions.
especially if you get to a level where you're referring to it as an addiction. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, purpose is obviously a really important part, and I understand filling your life in with shit if you don't have a purpose and you sort of think like, well, what else am I going to do? So that appears with your wife's job situation and then you getting this new role. So bang, you've got purpose. But if you're saying you've also got an addiction, was that really something that you could just turn off overnight? Or what was that like?
No, no way. It led me, those situations led me to want to get help. So they led me to the realization with addiction. My mindset on addiction is you can lead a horse to water, right? But you can't make it drink. So anyone who's going through an addiction actually has to want to get the help. You can book the appointments, you can set up the meetings, all that kind of stuff. But if they do not want the help, then it's not going to work. And that goes deep down. You can attend the first couple of sessions and whatever else and be like, cool, I'm onto something. But as soon as you feel that vice again and put yourself into that environment because you're allowing yourself to, it's going to fail. It's not going to work. And with addiction, you do fail. You do fall off the horse, but it's the ability to recognize that and then get back onto the horse. And so with my gambling, as I said, the 100-day challenge, there were times I made it to day 5 and I was super proud and I let my guard down and I went back to it. And then you start again. And that resentment, that embarrassment, that shame you feel is very real. It sucks because at the end of the day, you're dealing with an addiction, but you take it so personally and you wear all the blame for it and everything like that. And so it does take good people around you to continue to support you and check in on you and hold you accountable. And I think that's one thing that really worked well for me was I knew at any point in the day, my wife would ask me how I'm going with my gambling. Have I gambled? And for me, that was a really cool thing because I was like, well, I don't want to let her down. So if I go and gamble today and she asks, just on the off chance she could ask, I'm going to be honest with her and I'm going to be saying, no, sorry, I gambled. And I don't want to lie to her. So that's really tough for me. So the fact that, you can't switch it off, but it takes work, it takes time, it takes effort. You've got to put in the time. And, I was seeing a counsellor through Gamblers Help one-on-one for a period of time, which was fantastic. Started off weekly, then went fortnightly, then went monthly, and then it just turned into telephone calls, which was great. Like it's a commitment you have to commit to. But I harp about the 100-day challenge because it helped. Again, it worked for me, so I did it. It's not going to work for everyone, but it worked for me. I liked that idea of having a platform in my phone that I could turn to for support and that anonymous support as well, because it is an embarrassing thing. In my mind, I was ashamed of what I was doing and what I was going through and the money I was spending and all that kind of stuff. And I just felt gross about it. So it was nice to have that, be that anonymous presence, if that makes sense. So definitely not something I could switch off. The drinking was a little bit easier. As I said, it was more binge stuff. And once I started to find things on the weekend to fill my time, that definitely helped. But, like, for example, I never thought I'd be able to do it. But since I'd started drinking, I wouldn't have ever had probably more than a month off, if that. So, since sort of, the age of 17, 16, probably 17 when I started drinking, never have had a more than a month off. Now at the start of this year, because we're going through the IVF process, I wanted to give it everything. So I had about 4.5 months off drinking and it was fantastic. The clarity, people talk about the clarity, but literally the no brain fog was huge. The motivation on the Sunday mornings, but also if you didn't want to do anything on a Sunday morning, you felt good because you're like, I haven't polluted my body. So maybe I'd want to have a day off the gym. Fantastic. You don't feel that pressure to go and do those things. So the drinking for me was a lot easier, but the gambling was certainly not something that I could just flick of a switch, get off. You had to commit to it and then put the time in.
Did you have to get to a point where it was really hurting you financially before you accepted that it was a problem?
Yeah, definitely. I think that for me with the gambling, it was something about, again, like any gambler, that trying to hit that hit of dopamine. It became less about the money and more about that feeling. But, at the end of the day, I was a shit better. It wasn't like I was getting these massive wins and losing it. I would never get wins. I would just keep chasing and keep digging. So it's funny because, I always like to say that I love golf, but I'm shit at golf, but I still keep turning up. And maybe that's that mentality I had around gambling. I was bad at it, but I still kept doing it. So there's some form of impulse, addictive behavior there, I suppose. But yeah, there was definitely had to hit, my version of a rock bottom to realize I need help, because you think you're in control when you're facing addiction, certainly early stages. And even as you go through it, you're like, well, the only way out of a financial debt is to win money. You can't stop and save. You have to keep winning and winning. But when you don't win anything, that hole becomes pretty deep pretty quick.
Yeah, and that's the only addiction where it seems like the way out is to do more of it,
Mm.
which is part of what makes it so diabolical.
Yeah, exactly right. And I know a handful of people that have gone through it, and the varying levels of debt that they're in and were in and that I was in, they're probably poles apart. But at the end of the day, it's relevant to you and relative to you. So, a 10 grand debt to someone might be the end of the world, whereas they might be like, oh, that's a Saturday afternoon, but at the end of the day, it's still a challenge that you've got to get through, and you do need people around you to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think it's worth touching on gambling in footy culture as well. I mean, it's so
Oh,
massive, man. If you've
yeah.
ever watched a game of AFL, especially these days, it's just, you cannot escape it. And what's that like for you down at your footy club and just with the young lads that you work with? Because lots of
Yeah.
clubs,
Look,
lots of communities of young guys, it's just like, it's constant.
absolutely right. So I think for me, it's not so much like as in, and I'm not saying it's at our footy club because it definitely is, but the awareness that I've had is when I run these sessions at sporting clubs, they're generally on a Tuesday or Thursday night. So if it's a Thursday night, there's generally a footy game on either that night or the next night. And whenever we walk into rooms, the amount of people that I see on their phone with the blue of Sportsbet, the green of Tab,
Putting on
the
a
orange
multi.
net, red of Ladbrokes, whatever it is, that you can see it on their screen and they're going through, looking at the odds and all that kind of stuff. And, rocking up, even at my footy club, rocking up on Saturdays and hearing fucking day cost my multi last night. And that's the first thing people say. And I know that happens at every club. And I spoke in front of one of the leagues the start of the year, and I was like, if anyone thinks that your club doesn't have a gambling or a drug and alcohol challenge, you're wrong. Because drugs are equally as big in sporting clubs, all clubs, but sporting clubs in particular, footy clubs, sorry, but also the gambling part of it as well. And the alcohol one's a really interesting one because it funds the club. It's the biggest earner, your bar sales. So how do you try and draw that comparison between responsible service and making money? Because you've got to compete and be financially stable, but you also want to offer alternatives. So I think that's a big part. And I'll give a shout out to my friends at Heaps Normal because I love them. I think they're fantastic. They're great non-alc beer. Best beer I've had that is non-alc, but that got me through the 4.5 months of not drinking. The ability that we could go and I could still go to the pub and have a Heaps Normal with my mates and be there and be present in those conversations, but then just drive home. Awesome. So I think the footy clubs have a long way to go. And I'll say football, netball clubs, because it is those, they are big communities. But even with women's footy and stuff, we need to do more about trying to support the idea that it's okay if you don't want to drink. So whether that be having, I think the simplest answer so far is just having non-alc alternatives. Have options there that are non-alcoholic. It doesn't matter what they are, but having something there that people can go, cool, I want to be here. I want to have a beer. I don't feel comfortable drinking 5 Cokes. Maybe I have, 5 non-alc beers. Maybe that's a bit better. So, yeah, but the gambling piece is really interesting too, because I've gone to, it's getting younger and younger as well. And that's where we talk about being that role model. So if an under 19 kid comes into a club and he sees all the senior guys gambling, well, that's what he accepts. That's how he feels he can fit in, joining the punters clubs, doing all those kind of things. Whereas if you walk into a club and everyone has their phones away on Thursday night selection because it's all about talking and not actually being on your phone, fantastic. That's what he knows the new norm is. That's what he knows is acceptable. He's going to feel awkward pulling his phone out. So those little tweaks that you can make in those clubs are important. But the other one as well is we ran a session at a school not long ago, and I had we ran a session on a Friday, and a young kid there would have been year 10, I think. He was like, "Oh, my multi got up last night," and I was like, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Oh, I picked 8 legs and it got up," and I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I walked away and I went back to him and I was like, just out of curiosity, how are you putting that bet on? Because like whatever, like it's your life, but like you're clearly not 18. How are you putting it on? He goes, "Oh, I give the tips to my dad, and my dad puts a $5 multi on for me." And so then you've got that role model right there in his life who is, acknowledging it and accepting it. And all of a sudden, a $5 multi once a week, well, that seems harmless. But for someone who's been doing it between 16 and 18 before they can get their own sports bet or tab account, whatever it may be, all of a sudden that can increase quite quickly. And certainly when you're dealing with digital money that doesn't feel real, it's just a transfer into the account. You're not actually handing 50s over. That's when it can become a real problem really quickly. So I think that piece about, maybe that's how the parents feel like they connect or can connect, or the older brothers that let them use the account can connect. But that's a real problem, and that's something that's going to be a real problem for years to come.
Well, I'm sure it's a much bigger problem than we fully comprehend that it is, especially among young men now. And yeah, like I was at the footy. I'm a long-suffering Carlton supporter, unfortunately.
Poor thing.
And, yeah, it's been a rough 30 years. But I was at the footy with Dad the other week, and I walked past this dad talking to his kid about his multi, and the kid was like, "Oh, Dad, like, what have you put on for the multi?" And the kid would have been like 10. And I was just thinking, like, fuck, man, like, that's just, yeah. I mean, the thing is it's become synonymous with our culture. And to an extent, you can't blame people because it's so normalized. It's chucked up there, like, with ads and with
We have a day
before
off
the
for it,
footy.
Melbourne.
Before the footy sports bet show, oh, here's what we're putting on tonight, right?
Yeah.
So it's so normalized. It seems like it's not, there's nothing wrong with it. So for people who don't have that education, or for the majority of people still who won't actually become problem gamblers just from gambling a bit. I mean, there's plenty of people who can put on a bet and then not put on another one until, a few weeks later or whatever. It's different for everyone. But to totally ignore the very real risk of people developing serious gambling harm and addictions, and just have this culture where, oh yeah, everyone has a drink and then puts a bet on, and we can't watch a footy game without having a multi on, and even like the kids will get involved, where the amount of money that you're betting is kind of, especially for younger people, like not the point, because you're ingraining this attitude. And then everywhere it's just being reaffirmed that, well, I won't say particular names of companies because they all try to do it, but insidiously making it about connection. Like, oh, it's about your mates. We do it with our mates and we do it all together, and it's this bonding
there's
exercise.
a great example.
And it's
And again,
that is sick.
I know you don't want to mention names, but there's bet with mates, right? That's the thing, right? So you've got to, they're trying to make it cool and quick and easy, and all of a sudden, yeah, it is, but until you realize you're in it, and all of a sudden you're going, fuck, now I'm in it. And I'm struggling in it, and I'm deep down in it. And now I don't want to get out of it because I'll lose that connection with my mates. I'll lose that friendship with my mates, because that's the one thing you have in common. We all grow up and we get different jobs and we move away and whatever else. But the one thing we have common is a punters group. So all of a sudden I'm in it to be connected and stuff like that. And that's completely okay. But it's just it can be a challenging thing when you're wanting to be a part of a group, but you're in those groups. That's where it can be a bit tricky for you.
Yeah, and it's just like, let's find some better stuff to bond over.
Well,
but then there are people would argue like, oh yeah, well we do that and we're all fine, so all good. And I guess in that case, then you make your own call there, and plenty of situations, I suppose it is fairly harmless. But there's lots of them there where like you might have a guy in that group who's gambling every day and you don't have any idea about that.
That's the thing. We're all fine, but who's actually fine in it? And that's where I found myself as well, in those groups, being like gambling too much, but seeing someone else win in there as well, and that makes you want to go again. You know what I mean? So it's a very interesting space. But at the end of the day, Melbourne Cup, we have a public holiday for a horse race. That's not the culture. I don't know what is. So it makes it very, very tricky in those and try and navigate those waters, I suppose.
Yeah, it's just the way it's marketed as, just a bit of fun. But it's like, you have a young guy come into a footy club, and this has certainly happened in the past and would still happen today in some places where, you wouldn't say you shouldn't say to a 17-year-old kid, oh yeah, just have a line, it won't do you any harm. And some people would argue, most people can do a line and be fine, and it doesn't become a problem. But there's some people it becomes a real problem real quick. And
real quick.
That and drinking and gambling all share that, in that can become seriously harmful for some people. And I think the problem is that people who would encourage that, who don't have a really negative experience with it personally, then just assume that whoever else is coming up underneath them will be the same and react the same way. But I've known guys, and had a guy on this podcast who, he was only 17, 18, joined a footy club, wet behind the ears, and the guys were getting on the bags. And so he got introduced to it, and then bang, he was an addict within a couple of months, and his life completely spiraled. And like most guys would be like, what the fuck, I'd never see that coming. But the thing is, you're dealing with stuff here that is actually really highly addictive, and we're just monkeys. So sometimes it's going to go south.
It's spot on. It's highly addictive. So what do you think's going to happen when you do that stuff?
So Tim, just tell me about Outside the Locker Room.
Yeah, so we're a mental wellbeing organisation. So we're a charity that goes around to local sporting clubs, so grassroots sports. We have worked with a few professional outfits as well, schools and workplaces across the country. And we do mental health workshops, essentially. We have 8 different content pieces, so we try and tackle different areas. So there is a mental health one, a leadership and culture. We've got drug and alcohol, gambling, cyber safety, resilience. So there's a whole heap of different mindsets, models there that we kind of target. It is quite, I would say, basic education, but we don't get there and tell you the responses. We get you to tell us the responses, because different communities will have different signs and symptoms, for example, mental health and drug use and everything like that. So, we don't get there and say, hey, this is what you should look out for. We say, what do you think you should look out for? Because a farmer who plays at a country town is going to have completely different signs than myself, who lives in Metro Melbourne, So that's what we kind of do there, which is quite cool as well. So you do make it a bit tailored, but we do believe in the power of storytelling. So we get out there, we have lived experience facilitators who go out and run our sessions, and majority are from sport, which is why we're able to connect so well with sporting clubs, and some aren't as well. So they get out there, they share their story, they show vulnerability, creates this big area of trust in the room. Again, we're not asking anyone else to share their story. We're just letting you know that it's okay if you've gone through these things, because we have, and we're still here, and we're still, we're not by any means an finished product, but we're still working through our own challenges daily. But this is how we do it. So really try and include that idea that, these things work for me, so I do them. You're going to have your own ones, but you go and do them. So that's a pretty cool process there as well. We always send 2 people as well. Generally speaking, we send 2 people depending on where the session is. So we'll send a lived experience facilitator and a welfare professional, because obviously we do talk quite triggering content. So if anyone does need to step outside and grab some fresh air and need that support, we have, on the ground support for them as well. We have a welfare support app, which is quite popular, just with the functions it does have. It's more of a connective tool. So if you are struggling with drug and alcohol, gambling, violence, identity, whatever it is, you can go on that app and find the various supports there. But through that as well, we do have a telehealth counselling provider with Redefine Life, who are based in Baronia, which is not too far from me, but obviously being telehealth, they can be accessed anywhere. So that's hugely popular with the regional and rural towns that we go to, and community clubs and whatnots that we go to up there as well, which is kind of cool.
And how much are clubs taking to this stuff? I mean, anecdotally, I know that suicide's a big problem at footy clubs. I mean, you could say that's just because there's a lot of young men at footy clubs, so it's that makes sense. But certainly you do hear quite often about that happening, and that's devastating for those communities. How attuned are you finding that sporting clubs are to services like yours?
Yeah, well, firstly, we say we don't care who you get someone. So, we don't care if it's us, if it's another organisation, but just get someone. Show that you're trying to do the right thing and you're trying to support your members. The reality of it is, and as bad as this sounds, there are people that try to get us in, but we're a fee-for-service organisation, so we're not government funded, so the clubs have to come up with the money. Now, we work with those clubs. We work with them for, sending them a letter of support. We support them in any way that we can to basically, apply for funding through your community banks, through your local councils and anything like that, just to get us out there for the sessions. But the thing that I've noticed in the more recent times, unfortunately, since the 2 Selwood brothers unfortunately passed away, sporting clubs, and in particular football, have certainly made a more conscious effort to try and engage us, which is, again, it's one of those things that it sucks that it's taken incidents like this for it to happen, but it is happening. So slowly those changes are coming. The clubs are starting to understand that your physical health's fantastic, and you want to be fit and healthy, but you've also got to be mentally fit too, which is that's a good sign that the clubs are getting us in. But as I said, unfortunately, it sucks that it's taken these type of incidents and challenges for it to happen.
What impact does it make on the clubs? How do they change after your sessions?
Yeah, well, we like to consider ourselves as not a fly-in, fly-out product, so we're always in contact. I think the biggest help, or that the piece that the club know, is that they've always got us there for support. So if something does happen and they do need to reach out, they can reach out to us. I think that's a really big thing that we see. But I think from the point of view is, my mindset behind each session is I always try and impact one person in a positive way. So whether that be someone who opens up about their gambling, someone after the fact, someone who gets support around their gambling or around their mental health, or whatever it may be, their drug and alcohol use. But it's kind of knowing that. And unfortunately, we don't know that. We leave the club physically. We stay in contact with the club. Occasionally we'll hear from the club contact that, little Johnny's gone out and got some support fantastic. That's so good to hear. We get a nice testimonial after or something like that. But the reality is those people that want to get support, they're probably still not feeling as comfortable to reach out to the club support, who's generally the wellbeing. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's just the president, but they're not necessarily comfortable enough to say to that person, hey, I've gone and got that support. But they may come up to us after the session and say, thanks so much, that I needed to hear that, which is kind of cool as well. So we get that nice feeling that we have impacted someone. From our organisation, I have the mentality and the sort of saying anytime something comes up, it's impact over inconvenience. And the reason I do that is because, we're a non-for-profit organisation. We drive our own cars to sessions and stuff like that. We've gone, 4 hours each way to run a session. And we're happy to do that because that's the impact over the inconvenience. We go to rural towns, across the country, wherever we're needed, we go. And we do that essentially sometimes at our own detriment, driving back certain hours of the night and staying away from friends, family, sporting commitments, things that we've done to impact these communities. I do it all again. I don't care. So that's the impact over that inconvenience piece, which we just want to make the world a better place. We want to help one person at a time. We want, 9 suicides per day. 7 males, it's 2 females, it's too many. 1 is too many. So we're desperately trying to bring that number down, and that's the driving factor that we have. That's our passion behind that. And that's where, we just want to be available for everyone, for any club that wants us. We don't want to have to get the message back saying, sorry, we can't afford you. Sorry. I had one from a school once that said from the school welfare to say that the school's going in a different welfare direction, and in brackets, it was purchasing a new TV. And stuff like that. And that's fine. That's the school's direction. But I hate that. I hate the fact that there could have been a kid in that room who I could have got through to. Who knows? But now I won't know because they haven't been able to come up with funding or, they haven't communicated that. And look, at the end of the day, we are, as I said, whilst we are a fee for service, there are times we do bend over backwards for certain clubs that need it. I'm very proud of the fact that we do that. If there is dire situations, we still go in, and that's to our own detriment, right? We are a business at the end of the day. We're trying to keep the lights on, but we do that kind of stuff because, again, our impact over the inconvenience. It's a horrible business model because you're giving away your product for free, but we do it because we care.
Yeah,
the idea is if we're not around, that's a great thing because it means that everyone's talking about their mental health.
I believe the fact is that services like yours should be government funded in the first place. The fact that clubs have to scrounge for money so that they can pay for a business like yours to go there and provide a very valuable service. So of course you should get paid. But there is a bit of an attitude when you're providing a service like this, which is doing a good thing. Sometimes people can think, oh, well, you should do that for free somehow, like, or for pennies, like, just because it's a good service that people really need. So you should go around like Jesus and just like somehow deliver it. But of course you have
water
to.
into wine.
Yeah, that's right. And that doesn't work either because you need to be able to run your own life and support the time you put in, of course. So people have to get paid. But I think we just need the government to step in and just start giving hundreds of millions of dollars to mental health, and not just to a couple of the biggest organisations at the top, but to all the grassroots organisations like yourself, and maybe this podcast would be nice as well. People who are going out there and doing it at a grassroots level and teaching a man to fish, because I think that's really how we have that cultural shift. It's going out to these clubs and having those connections and those conversations all over the country with years and years and years, and that building up and then slowly changing culture. But there needs to be viable for people to actually do that. And it is tough for clubs because they're not really money-making organisations.
A lot of them are non-for-profits, they're there to run an environment that fosters connection for their members, and that's fantastic. But they want to add extra services. They want to add extra layers to that. They want to create further connection by educating people and making sure they don't have to deal with a loss if they can, putting things in place that, no matter what happens, that they can say that they've tried everything to create the best environment they can, and that's fantastic. And you mentioned the bigger players in the industry and stuff as well. They are still doing amazing things, and it's fantastic that they are getting the support they need because they do incredible things. But I do agree it would be nice to have some of that sort of trickle down to the smaller organisations. But at the end of the day, that's the nature of the world. Again, you got to play the card you're dealt. You can't turn around and say I'm a victim.
No.
We just have to get to work. We just have to head down, bum up, get to work and try and do what we can do and support those that we can. And if we have to jump in a car and drive 4 hours to run a 60-minute session, well, guess what? We're doing it because we love the fact that community that we go to and run those sessions, that maybe, just maybe, there's one person in that room who says, some of the things he was talking about, I feel, and maybe some of the ways he got support, I reckon I could do. And some of the ways he changed his life, I reckon I can implement. And before you know it, that person is living a better life than what they would have or what they could have or what they ever knew was possible.
And you never actually know the extent of the impact that you're having there.
You're not going to know.
Some people will reach out and say something, but it's probably the people who don't say anything, or maybe they don't even speak about it, but something switches in their mind, and then you don't know, you might have saved a life. What's this done for you and your own recovery and your own perspective in mental health?
It's certainly obviously opened my eyes up around the need for it. I was for a long time only involved in one football club, then went to a couple of others, and, you still see the same common themes. There's always the drinking, the gambling. You see the communities that have limited volunteers, all that kind of stuff. It's the same everywhere you go. So it's definitely opened up my eyes through that. Obviously seeing now several football, netball, sporting clubs go through it. I think the other thing, it's definitely taught me resilience. So when you're applying for funding and when you're talking to big organisations about potential funding, something that it might mean the world to you, but it's quite insignificant for them, and they're saying no, that's the nature of the game. And again, you can't sit there and complain, but it can definitely take a toll on you, but you just learn to be resilient with it, and it can shift your mindset as well. But I look at that, and through this job, I've gotten into some pretty cool rooms with some pretty cool people and been able to chat through and learn. And, I'm supporting Richmond, but I grew up loving Matthew Richardson, and all of a sudden I've done a podcast with him. That's the kind of stuff that doesn't happen to everyone. And I'm so thankful and grateful for that. So the lessons it's taught me, resilience is one, but gratitude is the other one as well, because how lucky am I to be able to do that job where I can go out and potentially impact someone's life in a positive way. Not many people can say they do that. And whether I do or not, as you said, I'm probably never going to know, but I do like to believe that I am creating the world, creating a better place, one club, one community, one sport, school, one workplace at a time, which I'm very proud of as well.
Yeah, and talk about purpose. I really do think that is the antidote ultimately to some of those things that you've been faced with in your life. And it seems like you've found your calling, and you are where you're meant to be, mate. So very happy for you, and happy that we've got people out there like you who are willing to drive for 4 hours and do what it takes to make sure that clubs get the conversations going that they need, because you don't know just how far that can go. But we certainly need more of it, mate. So good on you and your colleagues for doing what you do.
Appreciate it, mate. Appreciate it.
And I'll just keep getting my resilience from being a Carlton supporter.
Yeah. Hey, mate, you got to deal work with the hand you dealt. Having said that, that's probably from one of your parents, I dare say. Your misery stems directly from your father, unfortunately. So
that's he's all too aware of that.
He's probably feeling it as well, mate.
At least we're doing it together, And if ever we do win, it's going to be so much sweeter.
Yep, absolutely. As I said,
we're
mate,
talking about the importance of having something to aim for. There's nothing better than being Carlton supporter, because you're never going to be satisfied, because you're always having a bad time.
You're always hoping.
Awesome to chat to you, mate. I've kept you for a fair while, but plenty to talk about there, and heaps to your story. And it's great to see you living it now and doing so much good with what you've been through and who you've become. So credit to you. Keep going.
I appreciate it, mate. Thank you for having me.
That's it for this episode. If you like what we're all about, support us by following Youngblood Men's Mental Health on Instagram and Youngblood Mental Health on TikTok. Every podcast episode is recorded in professional quality video, and they're all up on our Youngblood Men's Mental Health YouTube channel. So please show some love and subscribe. You can find everything there is to know about the podcast at youngbloodmensmentalhealth.com. And most importantly, please share these stories with anyone in your life who needs to know they're not alone. We're all in this together. Catch you next time.